as way of introduction, let me tell you that I am not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a researcher. What I do is movement education. I've been involved in martial arts for a lot of years, really interested in the history of the human body. I've been to Africa a few times, and I write books. So what I've done over the last couple of decades is try to gather up all my understanding of the history of the human body into one sort of unified view. And recently what I discovered was this phrase called the long body. And this comes from the Native American tradition, but it's very obscure. If you were to Google this, you would find hardly any hits. I think it comes from the Iroquois tradition. And what I've decided to do is run with this idea and see how far I can go with it. And I would like to road test it with you today. So this is the long body. And by way of background, of course, we need to talk about our problems of trying to adapt in the modern world. And this is familiar old news to most of us, the fact that our bodies came from this old place. Our bodies are ancient, our bodies are aboriginal, we are all African. Every detail of our anatomy, our physiology, our social behavior is all ancient. And now we're trying to live in this new place, what a lot of people call the alien environment. And of course, as we just heard, it's a question of mismatch. And this is something that it's a new scientific concept, but it's also something that we feel personally. A lot of us feel maladapted to the modern world, and it's not just us, it's a real thing. And the consequences are severe, obviously. We've gone from this to this in the blink of an eye. Now, a lot of us will pin the blame on agriculture, and we'll say that the tipping point was 10,000 years ago, this transition from pre-agriculture to an agricultural way of life destroyed our bodies. We've gone from resilient, vigorous hunter-gatherers to whatever it is here on the right. But I think this has happened much more recently. This maybe the last 100 years. This is a 20th century thing. And throughout the 20th century, all of these afflictions are on the rise. All of these conditions, all of these problems with our bodies, and not just our bodies, but these are psychophysical. These are problems of our psychology, problems of our spirit, and all of these things are on the rise. But when we're going to talk about the body, we have to choose the right lens. When we're going to talk about anything, any photographer will tell you, you have to choose the right lens. And I'm going to propose to you that we have chosen the wrong lens in a lot of circumstances to look at the body. I think we're afflicted with a bit of myopia. Now, this is an actual real thing. Okay, there is an epidemic now of myopia. The journal Nature ran a piece here a couple of years ago on this. But it's not just literal myopia, it's the idea of myopia, this figurative myopia where we're zooming in, getting closer and closer to the body all the time, getting closer and closer to the object of our study. And in effect, this is what we do. We use lenses, we use instruments, and we use whole disciplines to zoom in on the body as an object. And we get closer and closer. And this is what I see. We use biochemistry, biomechanics, anatomy, physiology. No matter what health discipline you're involved in, you usually start with anatomy, right? Here are the muscles. Zoom in on the body, get closer and closer. And this is valuable information. This is good knowledge to be gained from this type of approach. But it also makes us go blind to some other things, especially the life-supporting relationships that exist outside us. And this is why I'm an advocate for zooming out. Oh, by the way, this is something that we see in our culture and our depictions of the human body. This is any newsstand, pretty much anywhere in the world. Have you noticed this? are depictions of the body with no background. We zoom in, we look at the body as an object. And in every case, it holds. Upper left here, obviously bodybuilders do this. They eliminate any background to make the body appear as an isolated individual unit that stands alone and apart from any other context, any other setting, any other life support system. And you would expect bodybuilders to do this, right? But even Golf Digest does it, right? And Men's Health, you never see a background. You never see a context. You never see a life supporting system for the body. So this is what I call the short body. And this is our cultural view of the body now. We look at bodies in isolation. And the problem that comes from this short body orientation is that we start to lose sight of the things that actually keep us alive. And I know a lot of you guys are trainers, coaches, teachers, working with people in their bodies. This is one of the fundamental questions. What is it that keeps us alive? Because it's not really diet and exercise. It's more like habitat keeps us alive and our tribe keeps us alive as well. So as an antidote to this short body orientation, I'm proposing a long body point of view. And when I use this phrase, the long body, I simply mean the isolated body plus its life-supporting systems of habitat and tribe. So when I say the long body, I'm talking about the totality of that system. And it's a nice way to look at bodies as bigger than they appear. This meme, by the way, is very disruptive. It's very inconvenient and it's very challenging because if you adopt this meme, if you adopt this idea, it challenges us to redraw a lot of boundaries in modern culture and to rearrange a lot of our thinking about the body and about health. But it's also a very positive and life-affirming idea. Now, when I've shopped this idea around to some people, and they say, well, Frank, is this just a metaphor? I say, well, yeah, it is a metaphor, but it's not just a metaphor. Even if it was just a metaphor, it would be a powerful one. We can use these terms short and long to talk about all kinds of features in our world, in our human experience. We can talk about short and long cultures, short and long attention spans, short and long commerce or relationships. Whatever it is, it's an incredibly powerful metaphor. Is it a native indigenous view? Yes. In fact, this idea of interdependence is probably, from my reckoning, this is probably one of the oldest ideas in the world. Every ancestral culture that we've studied makes note of this. It's bedrock. Is it scientifically valid? Yes, we have a mountain of research that points to the interdependence, the continuities between our bodies and habitat, our bodies and tribe. Is it a path to personal health? Yes, but in a paradoxical way. You take care of your short body first, and then start paying attention to your long body, the bigger than self orientation. That's also a way to maximize your health. And is it a spiritual path? Yes, because it breaks down the distinction between self and other. And every religious, spiritual tradition that we know of has taken a similar step. So I'll let you read this. Where is the me? Where does the me begin? Where does the other begin? And the cartoon answer, the Western civilization answer, is that, well, the me stops right here. The outermost layer of my skin, that is me, and everything outside of that is other. And that's the distinction that we, as Western educated people, tend to make. But That is not the norm in human history. Most ancestral people had a bigger view of me, a bigger view of who they were, a longer view. Here's a long body idea, an ancient long body idea. So again, interdependence being one of the oldest human ideas. If the people are sick, I too am sick. There's a tendency in our modern culture to create health islands. Whether they're communities or individuals, we think of them as health islands. They're separate from disease that's around them. But this older, long body view says, no, you can't do that. You can't create these health islands. It doesn't work. Relationship to habitat. This is a classic long body view. The environment is not something else. The environment is not out there. And these are people who didn't even know about the microbiome. They don't know about biology. They don't know about, they don't know what we know. And it's not just native people. Alan Watts, a famous Zen philosopher, touched on the same idea. I'll let you read this. External organs. What an interesting idea, to look at habitat as external organs. Now again, a skeptic would say, well, that's just metaphor. He's being poetic. And even if that's true, poetry is powerful, metaphor is powerful. But we could look at this as a literal truth. And we could look at these things differently. So these are not just pretty pictures to put on your wall in your office. No, these are actual organs of your body. They just happen to be big and over there. But they contribute to your health. They are part of us. We are part of them. And even the microbiome. Some people are calling this a bacterial organ. And the superficial idea is that, well, the microbiome is inside me. But if your body is a tube, which it is, then the microbiome is another external organ. It's also outside us. I'll let you read this. So from the standpoint of DNA, we are more microbial than human. So who's driving the bus? What is I? What is me? What is the extent of my body? How long is my body? We are so used to thinking about the microbiome now and trying to solve this microbial puzzle as a way to improve our own personal health. But the bigger message here, I think, is that it forces us to think, well, maybe I'm not the most important thing around. You know, maybe there's more to this story. The pronoun I becoming obsolete. You know, if you're really serious about biology, you're starting to see, wow, maybe I'm not an autonomous individual. And maybe my sense of self is kind of an illusion, which is what the Buddhists have been saying all along. So this is very much a long body idea. Now, another long idea here is the importance of context, the importance of setting, the importance of environment. Bruce Alexander, when he was a young researcher, he looked at the studies that were being done on addiction, specifically with the so-called highly addictive substances like cocaine. And the classic way to study this was to take a rat in a cage and see how much cocaine that rat would consume. And they would, of course, become addicted. And Bruce Alexander came along and said, well, there's something really wrong with this picture, because you're studying these animals who live in an alien environment. So why don't we give them a normal environment and see how they live. And that's what he did. He built what is called the rat park. And this was basically a utopia for rats. And it had all the features that normal rat populations would love. And then he would introduce these so-called addictive substances. And the rates of addiction were far, far lower. And so throughout his career now, he's emphasized the importance of setting and context and environment. So when you get serious about this long body idea, you start to understand that everything that we do is reflective. Everything that we do to the so-called external world, everything that we do to the so-called outside world is actually mirrored back onto us. And again, this is an old idea. Chief Seattle's famous speech, this is classic Native American stuff, but it's also classic indigenous thinking. You hear this same idea reflected from Australia to Africa to North America. It's all over the paleo world. To wound the earth is to wound yourself. And when we destroy habitat, that is just like cutting off a limb. And it comes as no surprise to see what's happened to indigenous people when they are displaced from their land. Because their sense of identity with the land is so complete. Let you read this one too. The earth hurts and we hurt with it. Theodore Roszak is an eco-psychologist. And again, the same rap could be said here. Oh, this is just poetry, this is just metaphor. But I think there's I think you can draw a very straight line from biospheric catastrophe to personal health. And it goes like this. When you feel your habitat being destroyed, when you feel your habitat under stress, and you can read about it or you can actually feel it, you feel stress too. And now your thresholds for disease and injury and illness begin to drop. Your sense of power and control is diminished. And so that has a very real biochemical effect on your body. And I can be certain that a lot of office visits in modern medicine are due to this kind of thing. The other implication here is that environmental activism is a form of healthcare. And this is something that mystifies me to no end, because what we do, we pigeonhole a lot of our behaviors now, and we say that some people over here at this end of campus or this end of town are doing environmental habitat preservation. These are the nonprofits, and they're doing good work in environmentalism. And over here at the other end of campus are the people who are working on health. Well, why don't we put those two groups together? I just don't understand. This should be a really tight alliance, and it's not. So we talked about habitat. Let's talk about tribe. Let's talk about people. This is a shot. I went to Africa and spent a little bit of time with the Hadza Bushmen. And the thing to remember about our social nature is that it's not just something that we enjoy. It's not just, it's more than just wanting to affiliate with other people. It's deep in our bodies. Our bodies are constructed to be social. And this is our social experience. Every day, unconscious, all the time. We're always measuring and trying to evaluate, are we in or out? And this is the question that we always ask. You know, did I get the job or was I rejected? Did I get invited to the party or not? What is it? We're always asking this question because this is the question that kept us alive on the grassland. Now, this is interesting, but it also has huge health consequences, as you see. The brain is a social organ. Cozzolino wrote this book, which is fascinating, about social neuroscience, or what some people call interpersonal neurobiology. The brain is a social organ, that sounds right, but he goes so far as to say there are no single human brains. In other words, we are so radically social, so massively connected with one another, that it doesn't even make sense to dissect out a single human brain, because they don't work that way. Why would you study them that way? We need other brains. We need conferences like this to function our best. And the flip side here, we know very well that solitary confinement is a form of torture. Our brains don't work very well there. Dan Siegel out of UCLA talks about the resonance circuit, and this is a circuit this is a long body circuit. This is a transpersonal circuit. So when I look at your bodies and your facial expressions and your postures, my mirror neurons fire, and it goes to my limbic system, and then down the vagus nerve into my gut, and then back up to my prefrontal cortex, which modifies my behavior. And now I'm including your body into this resonance circuit. And of course, this is the fundamental unit of social interaction. And we sabotage this like crazy with all our devices. This is not communication, because we've eliminated the resonance circuit. Bad news. We also know that behavior is intensely, it flows through social groups. And we could track this, people who measure the rise and falling of social behavior. It makes sense to know that your friends can influence your behavior. If one of your friends starts smoking or stops smoking or whatever they do, it can influence your behavior, obviously. But your friends' friends will also influence your behavior, even though you don't see these people very often. But if they change their behavior, it's more likely you will too. But it's even more than that. Your friends' friends' friends can also influence your behavior, and you never see these people. If they change their behavior, there's a chance you will too. We are that sensitive. Being part of the tribe or not makes our bodies more or less resilient. And this study was great. They looked at synchronous dancing versus asynchronous dancing. If you're dancing in part of a group, you feel part of that group, and then they measure your pain tolerance. Your pain tolerance is higher. In other words, your resilience is higher because you feel part of that totality. You are more powerful because of it. And this all comes together with Michael Marmot. This is one of the most inconvenient ideas out there right now. What Marmot did was studied epidemiological studies around the world, and there was a real consistency there. If you are of high rank, regardless of your culture, if you are of high rank, you're much more likely to be healthy than if you're of low rank. And this, they factored out all the things that might be obvious here. It's not just the case that rich people can go to the doctor, or that rich people can go to the gym, or that rich people can buy better food. It's not that. There's something fundamental about being of high rank that contributes to health, or vice versa. And it's probably stress, right? It's probably the sensation, the feeling, the perception of being in group or out group. This doesn't get nearly the play that it needs to get, because our social experience is fundamental to our health, and we don't talk about this nearly enough. It even goes down to the level of neurotransmitter receptors in your brain. If you're of higher rank, you're more capable of feeling pleasure, for example. And even myelin production. If you are socially isolated, you have less of this insulating wrapping around your axons, so the circuits don't function as effectively. Unbelievable. Now, some of you will be tracking this. Sebastian Junger basically gives us a long body perspective. He doesn't use that phrase, but it's very clear what he's talking about here is that his particular example, people go to war, they feel a really strong sense of tribe, community, bonding, physical psychological power that comes with that, and then they come back home, their tribe is gone, and now they suffer from PTSD. So it's an amazing long body approach. Versus, Ubuntu. If you haven't heard this word, this is great. This is an African philosophy of social identity. Thanks. And basically, it just says that I am not just a short body. I am not an individual. I am who I am because of who we are. We are people through other people. So this is, again, a very old idea of the long body. Long body medicine, this is a whole subject that we could really get into. I'll let you read that. Big pictures. A lot of people say, well, I'm holistic. I'm really taking in the big picture. And this is, you hear this all over the place. I went to massage school a few years ago. Everybody said, I'm a holistic practitioner because I do mind, body, spirit. But from what we've seen so far, this is not holistic, right? There's a lot of things missing here. George Engel said, well, it can't just be biological, it has to be psycho and social. That was an improvement. But really, the holistic model, mind, body, spirit, you have to include land, tribe, and ancestors. And this is a paleo model. If you read Aboriginal writing, interviews with Aboriginal people, this comes up over and over again. They will not talk to you without talking about land and tribe and ancestry. And this leads us to some solutions here. The people who are doing really good work come from a surprising place here, and that's the veterinarians. Their scope of practice is this big. The doctors, their scope of practice is this big, right? The veterinarians are getting together and saying, we need a One Health perspective. In other words, we need a long body perspective. Let's look at the animals, the non-human animals, and the human animals, and habitat all together. And this is their way to illustrate this one umbrella: public health, personal health, habitat health, all together in the same framework. It's showing up in more and more places. One Health Alliances, and One Health Day coming up in November. One Medicine Symposium, this is the same idea, putting it all together holistically. Long body prescriptions, start with the short body. Sure, I'm not suggesting that we throw out our short body medicine. All of this stuff is worthwhile. Ask your doctor if going outdoors is right for you. Get to learn your habitat, right? More face-to-face contact. That's how we work best. Start giving your health away. Health is achievable. For most people, we can figure out the formula and we can get healthier. And then what's the next step? Start giving it away to habitat, giving it away to social causes, to encourage the health of the long body and tell a new story. This is why I'm trying to get this long body meme out into the world, start getting it into conversation, getting it into story, because when we do that, we're going to shift human perceptions of who we are. So that's the meme. I've got an event coming up in October if you're interested. This is going to be a whole lot of fun, and it'll be a long body training, essentially. Lots of movement, some talks, the whole thing. It'd be really fun. So that's my wrap on the long body. Thank you so much. Any questions? 10 minutes? Okay.
Thank you for your talk. Do you believe it's possible to be healthy in a big city today?
Yes, absolutely. It's a paradox, and it's really strange, but there's a lot of people now talking about how that may even be a healthier place to live, because people in New York City walk more, they get out, there's that, they don't drive as much, but the clock is ticking on this stuff. I went to Hong Kong a few years ago, laid in my hotel room at night, and you could hear the trucks coming in all night long, bringing in the fat of the land, if you will. And it wasn't just Hong Kong. Then you start to think about all the habitat that supports Hong Kong, and you start to wonder. So I don't know. It's a good question. But yes, I think you could be healthy anywhere, but the long body's important too.
So I love your concept of external organs. I've always thought, well, the reason we have lungs is because there is air, right? Without air, we wouldn't even have lungs. But just in terms of tribalism and social interaction, what do you think the solutions are in terms of creating this tribal identity in a situation where we have anything but that? How many contacts do I have on Facebook? I can only really track about 50 people in my mind. So how do we start working with that?
Yeah, and this is all uncharted territory. You probably will have heard of Dunbar's number, and we have this cognitive capacity probably to deal with maybe 100 relationships, something like that. And to go from a tribe of 100 to this tribe of 7 billion people, we've never attempted to do that before, and we're not really set up to do that. So we need, I think, story. And I think there's got to be a spiritual change in how we see each other. I mean, we're naturally, remember the last talk, we're kind of xenophobic. And I notice that in myself, and I have to work with that. And say, well, that's my body. You guys are part of my body, and what I do to you, I do to me. So
yeah,
that's the best I can do with that. But
it's a challenge.
Yeah.
Cool, thanks.
Awesome talk.
Thank you.
Very undergoing a lot of cognitive hypertrophic adaptations right now as we speak. And what you said just stimulated a lot of creative juices, so thank you, and I'm sure everyone else feels the same. One question that is specific yet general, so I think it benefits a certain population as well as everyone, would be along the lines of cognitive dysfunction, dementia, kind of specifically Alzheimer's. You were talking about something that resonated with me under the name of environmental enrichment with the whole rat park. Mm-hmm. What I was thinking, and more, this is a question, I'm not expecting an absolute answer, more your thought, is with this population and early onset increasing, do you think an environmental enrichment approach, creating different boxes, stuff to hang off of, whatever it is, these are just limited physical stuff, and encouraging an environment with these individuals early onset would be beneficial, number one, because of social isolation, number two, because it challenges the brain through movement, peripheral nervous system through central nervous system, and basically because I don't know any other solution right now based on drugs, and the big thing is air pollution. So what do you think? Sorry, that's...
Well, that's a great question. It's a tough question, though, because I think environmental enrichment makes sense, but for some people, it's going to be overstimulation. Yeah. And there's going to be huge individual variation. So my case, I can only tolerate so much environmental enrichment. I need to go outdoors. I need to go out in nature and get less enrichment, if you will, or a different kind of enrichment. So I think we can approach it from both ways. Definitely enriching with our creative capacities and building things that are stimulating, yes, and going outside and getting more biophilic kind of enrichments as well. So
thank
maybe
you
a
for
rhythm there. Yeah.
I like that. You just challenged me again. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I really enjoyed your talk. One thing that I was hoping to hear about that kept on popping in my mind was about rites of passage. And I was wondering, I think that's something that's absent from today. I think so many people may graduate or achieve a certain age and you ask them how they feel and the general reply is no different. So are you willing to kind of guess or get specific and prescriptive about maybe developing rites of passage, maybe things that we should bring back?
Well, I'll be happy to speculate on that. I've been fortunate because I've had a couple of experiences in my own life that I think are relevant there. I studied martial arts for a lot of years, and this idea of progressing through the ranks and going through a black belt exam, that was a rite of passage and some hardship, and especially for young men, this is just an ideal thing. And also mountain climbing, rock climbing, that was another example of that is very valuable and totally absent for a lot of young people who, we give them everything and life is in effect far too easy. And I know Sebastian Junger would be all over that idea. Yeah, there has to be some sort of major physical challenging event in young adulthood. That's key.
Just continuing with that thought a little bit, we were talking about status and the consequences of individuals with low stats. I can't help but wonder if maybe it's not that it's status per se is the issue, but that there's status ambiguity. We have where our identities ourselves are so fractioned.
Right.
And in something like, and then as you mentioned, especially men seek environments where there is explicit, hierarchical, usually visual, artifacts that will look like clearly. You don't have to wonder, where they stand.
Right.
That kind of answers the anxiety of wondering where people's status is.
The tribal ambiguity is so huge because you can be a big dog in one domain and maybe at work, and then you go onto your softball team and now you're low rank, and back and forth all day long, and people don't know where they stand. So it's very tricky to navigate that, and it's very stressful. So we need more stress education, and we need all the stress relieving practices that are out there.
Thank you.
Thank you for your talk. I have a question about introversion, because I realize that introversion is different from social isolation, but I mean, I'm introverted like off the chart. I broke the scale, and is there some type of evolutionary reason for introversion? Like, oh no, you guys go out and hunt tonight, I'm just going to stay in the cave by myself. Because I realize it's so important to have connections and friends, but I need that time alone. I can't always be with people, but I realize that that's separate from completely not having a tribe. And sometimes when I'm with people, I feel really jumpy, but maybe I'm not with the right people. I don't know.
Right. Well, I think there's a place for it. And I share your feeling. I think that most successful tribes are going to have a diversity of inclinations. And it's always good to have highly extroverted people, especially risk-taking people who want to go out and do the hunt. They're jumping, they want to do the hunt. And some highly social people, but also introversion makes sense. People who are willing to maybe just sit and observe the savannah, observe the movement of animals or the long-term cycles of things. So diversity makes sense there too. So
that's true. No, thank you. And I just real quick, I'm a veteran, and what you said about the camaraderie is so true. I've never made friends as quickly as I did in that time, and especially going, and it doesn't even have to be in a military setting, could be any time you go through a hardship, I think, with other people, you bond so much more quickly and deeply than in really any other setting.
Right. And for a lot of us, the modern world is just way too easy. Okay, last question.
All right, I'll try to make it quick. I'm just curious, I could ask this question probably of any speaker, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts particularly on this. We're maladapted to our environment. It's kind of the theme here, right? And
right.
I find myself wondering, how much of this do you see as constraints? And we say, well, we're maladapted, so that's what we have to deal with, these limitations, so let's find strategies that work. Versus, because I hear passion also, right? Versus, no, we're meant to be these ways. Let's embrace and try and return to this natural way of being. Versus, no, that works, but maybe that's not the best way to be a human. Let's try to evolve away from that and find a way to become different, so that I can survive looking at my technology or whatever, whatever it may be. Just curious what you might think.
Right. Well, that's why mismatch is such a rich idea, because I think a lot of us tend to think that mismatch is universally a bad thing and we have to cure it, we have to fix it. But it's also a huge stimulus for creativity. Here we are, these ancient beings in this modern world, and a lot of us are getting juice from that and becoming more creative. So I think it cuts both ways, and I'd hate to see it go away entirely. You know, there's something to be said about being mismatched. So, yeah, let's solve some problems, but let's harness the ambiguity too.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.